All right, welcome to a Colorado Buffaloes analysis. I'm Brian Howell, and please be joined by Adam Munster Tiger. And Adam, we usually do these in person. We've been, doing so many of them, in person throughout the season, but we haven't really seen each other since Salt Lake City for the finale. So it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, quite a bit's happened with Colorado football since then. So good to catch up. And yeah, I miss being able to get in Folsom Field, have that nice backdrop, but we got to settle for our home offices. But yeah,
Yeah,
this is the second straight off season where there's so much talent acquisitioning happening that I almost feel like I'm covering a coaching search from a stress standpoint because there's so much happening and you want to find out about these guys. When a guy commits, you really want to, find out what folks are saying about them, what their potential looks like. So it takes quite a bit of work, but it's also a lot of fun just to see the level of talent that's coming into Colorado. I did a video with Chase Howell the other day where we're trying to pick out the most underrated guy in this class. And most of these guys are pretty highly rated. It's kind of hard to find some
yeah.
of those under the radar guys because they really have competed against for a lot of these guys the who's who of college football to get them to commit to the Buffs.
Yeah, I'll say real quick. It's funny because I still follow all the Pac-12 writers, and some of the guys that I follow that are posting like, "Oh, here's Utah's depth chart for their bowl game." I keep thinking, "Oh, there's people still playing football." I forget about that because we're so focused on the other part. But
Yeah.
you're right about that, and we're going to do a video later this week to talk more about the high school signees. We're going to kind of wait until after signing day until those are official. Now, obviously, the transfers aren't going to be official really until they get on campus, but we're going to focus more on transfers for today. But before we get into that, I want to make sure there's a lot of focus this time of year on whether people have their Christmas shopping done. I want to make sure, are you fully stocked with food and caffeine or energy drinks that you need for Wednesday?
You know, I, I'm fine. I
Yeah.
used to go and just go overboard with the caffeine, but then you kind of crash sometimes. So
Yeah.
I've with age, I've learned how to ease into signing day a little bit more. My alarm will still probably go off at 4:30, and we'll start the day with some coffee and. But yeah, I mean, back in your 20s and 30s, you can do things caffeine, things to your body that you can't do when you get in your 40s.
Well, and I will say, Coach Prime makes it a little easier on us. I mean, we'd probably rather have a press conference, but last year he did not do a press conference on signing day. I think he was the only coach in the Pac-12 that didn't, and you can kind of understand. I mean, he was just hitting the ground running, and I think they had just come off the Celebration Bowl, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be one this week. So it makes it easier on us. We don't have to go to Boulder at least, but it's still going to be a very exciting press conference or not. It's going to be a very exciting signing day for the Buffs, and but first before we get into the transfers, let's talk about some of these coaching changes because we have not talked about any of those. I know we've kind of done our own things with other colleagues talking about these things, but what are your takes on some of the coaching changes? I mean, Sean Lewis leaving, the handwriting was on the wall after that UCLA game, right? And then from there, you kind of expected O'Boyle to leave, Brewster to leave because of the way all that went down. But the one surprise is probably Nick Williams. But what are your thoughts on all the coaching changes on the staff?
Well, I know that Vincent Dancy is somebody that connects well with these players. And so
Yeah.
I am anxious to see how he does getting promoted into that position. And, this is somebody that took over a really struggling program in the FCS ranks, and they didn't have the resources to compete. And because of that, he developed a relationship with Coach Prime, and that turned into a friendship. And now they work together. They've worked really well together. And so a little bit more reserved than Nick Williams, who's a little bit more of a fiery type of guy, but Vincent Dancy really knows how to carry himself, and I think young people really respect him. So and he's been on the staff,
Yeah.
so the chemistry's got to be there with Sal Sanzeri.
Mhm.
Otherwise, Coach Prime's not making that promotion. And in terms of the play caller, we'll see. I mean, if that becomes official and Pat Shermer's the guy, then we'll react to the news. Then doesn't sound like 100% a done deal, so it's kind of hard to speculate on this point. But we know that Shedeur Sanders is very comfortable with Pat Shermer, and that's when you're looking at the next offense coordinator for Colorado in 2024, at least, that's got to be number one on the list, right? So
Yeah.
he does have that going for him, and I don't cover the Broncos, so I don't have these preconceived notions against him. He did some nice things in a couple of those games. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but also an OC is not going to be able to do anything groundbreaking the last month of the season with guys that are already pretty beat up and not necessarily trying to get to the finish line, but they're not in a position to put in a whole new offense in the month of November. So I would say yet to be determined in terms of him as a play caller at Colorado. And there's been such a huge gap, before with him being a college coach that it would be a risky hire. I don't think there's any other way to say that. But the fact that Shador and him get along so well would make me feel less nervous about it going in if that's indeed what they decide to do.
Yeah, it's been interesting that there's been no definitive answer on that, but he's been asked about it twice. Coach Prime has been asked about it twice in interviews, and both times he said, "Yeah, it's most likely going to be what I do." Well, that's kind of an unusual way to go about it. So yeah, it's most likely, but no definitive thing. I wound up we don't know Pat Shurmur that well. I think we did one press conference with him, but I actually wound up. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the Washington State game, as bad as that was, I had to send my story as soon as the game's over and get to the elevator and head down. I wound up riding in the elevator down with some of the coaches, and one of them was Pat Shurmur, and he said hi to him. I said hi to him when they got in the elevator, and said hi. And there's that long walk from the elevator to the stadium to where the press conference is, and he and I wound up talking that whole time. And nice guy. Coming off of a 56-14 or right after a 56-14 loss, he was still pretty cordial and nice. And we talked about some different things from that night, but it'll be interesting to see what he does. But it's clear Coach Prime said after the Utah game that he and Shador get along really well, and that's important. Regardless of his experience in the college level, I think number one is you've got to have connection with your quarterback and OC, and it looks like they have that. And so if that's what they have, then that's a good thing. And so we'll see. But I think all they need right now is a tight ends coach, right? Because O-line coach looks like Phil Lodeholt. CU's never announced it, but that's what we understand. But I think all they need is a tight ends coach, right?
That's correct, unless they, do bring on an outside offensive coordinator here in the coming weeks. But yeah, I was just talking with Khalil Benson, who's transferring in from Indiana to play for Phil Lodeholt on that offensive line, and I asked him what kind of impression Coach Lodeholt, in Boulder had made on him, and he said that he's not a super vocal guy, but he said after I got done talking with him, any doubts I had about playing at Colorado were completely out the window. So that's a small sample size. Me just talking to one of the transfers that's coming in, and Phil Lodeholt has not been in Boulder very long. But one of the things I like about him, and I've said this before, is that this was somebody that was actually going to come to CU initially. So he's got some history in this area, has some familiarity, which isn't the most important thing, but nothing about living in Boulder is going to really surprise him.
Yeah.
But he had to go the JUCO route. And then he becomes a JUCO All-American, goes to Oklahoma, plays in one of the greatest offenses in college football history. So he's seen both sides of what it's like to be in college, kind of the underdog trying to work your way up and being humbled to the JUCO ranks, and also being, at Oklahoma and being one of the stars of that offense, a guy that was, what was he, a second round draft pick by the Vikings? He was drafted pretty early on. So the pedigree is there. Does he have full-time offensive line coaching experience at the Power 5 level? No, but he's been around Oklahoma, was around Ole Miss before that. So I wouldn't say he's got pretty good experience, but the one thing you would say if you're questioning the hire a little bit is that he has not been in the position he is at Colorado right now in terms of being that full-time guy.
Yeah, and he also didn't go to one of the big name high schools. He went to Fountain Fort Carson High School, so he wasn't even at a Cherry Creek or some of these other guys like a DeSoto or a Mater Dei, things like that. He knows how to work his way up, and frankly, as soon as he was done playing, he got into some of those those coaching scholarship programs, things like that. I don't know what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. That those developmental coaching roles,
like an apprenticeship.
Yeah. And so he's put in the work, and obviously from the time he finished playing, this is something he's wanted to do, and he's put in some work to get to this point. So we'll see with him. But your conversation with Phil, or not Phil, Khalil Benson, is probably a good segue into talking about the transfers, because I think there's 15 guys. There was 16, for about 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden there was 15. But I think there's certain areas, there's different ways we can go with this, but I think one of the main areas obviously was offensive line. And Coach Prime, we remember, after that UCLA game, he said, "Big picture, you go get new linemen." Well, he's gone to get new linemen, and we thought he had 5, but one of Khalil Benson's teammates, Matthew Bedford, just this afternoon announced he's going to go to Oregon instead. But let's start offensive line. What have you thought about what they've done with the offensive line so far through the transfer portal?
Yeah, I don't know how big of a hit Bedford going to Oregon is, but I loved his versatility, because this was a guy that had played every position except center. And you look about trying to figure out how to put all these new pieces together, and Bedford seemed like the kind of this interchangeable piece that you could move to a lot of different spots. So that part of it is the part that I don't like. But Justin Mayers was a guy that had 17 offers within a couple of days of hitting the portal. And this is a guy that folks in that area that know about UTEP football say that he's got NFL potential. He just didn't really have the exposure. And now he's going to get that exposure, obviously. So, Colorado's such a great place for somebody like Justin Mayers, that a little bit under the radar, very solid, has gotten better every year in college. And now, as long as he's ready, this is going to be the biggest spotlight an offensive lineman can go into, right? And so if you perform well in that spotlight, you're going to get paid. You're going to get drafted. And so I think he's one of the guys that stands out. Tyler Johnson coming in from Houston and is another guy that I'd be surprised if he's not a starter for the Buffs this coming year. And then Yakiri Walker's a little bit intriguing, not the biggest guy that they bring in. And then Benson, he says that he likes playing tackle a little bit more. He played right tackle this past year. He was at right guard the year before. So he thinks he's going to be starting out at tackle to begin, which would make sense, especially with Bedford now going to Oregon. And we'll see. Maybe they add a couple pieces there. We've seen Brian at other positions, and I'm sure we'll get there, but receiver's one of them where you might go, well, okay, I think they're okay there. They've got enough pieces. And then they want to keep adding. And they want to get more and more competition within each position group. And so with that said, especially with Bedford going to Oregon, I try to bring in a couple more guys on that offensive line just to really bolster that competition and that depth.
Yeah, and actually, we're doing this on Monday. On Saturday, I wrote a piece kind of looking at the depth, and I thought they're probably done at offensive line there. But then there's 2 guys I wrote about in that piece that are not going to be a part of the plans now. So things change very quickly in recruiting. But I agree with you at this point. You probably want to add, a couple more. We can't forget that as of right now, Savion Washington looks like he's coming back, and he played pretty well before he had that injury midseason. Came back, and from what I've heard, was not fully healthy, but they kind of needed him back. He was playing a little gimpy the last half of the year when he came back, and didn't look as good. But if he's fully healthy and he's back, I think that's a good tackle piece. And Tyler Brown, who didn't get to play this year, they love him. Obviously, he came from Jackson State. He's an intriguing piece as to what he can do. Jack Bailey is still on this roster, and we'll see with him with another year. I know Buff fans were on him all year, but with another year, maybe he's a good piece, and maybe he factors in at center as well. I know he is snapped as well. So there's still some intriguing pieces that are on this team combined with the guys coming in. So I think it's a better offensive line, but you're right. As far as spotlight, as much as Coach Prime talked about the offensive line, I think Colorado offensive line might be one of the most viewed positions next September. Is okay. How does that group look? How many times is Shedeur Sanders getting sacked?
Yeah. I mean, you throw in Tyler Brown and Hank Zelinskas too on the offensive line. You forget Hank Zelinskas was a true freshman this past year. The fact that they would even trust him to be out there as the backup when Van Wells went down, and then you create a special package where he's an extra blocker out there. So that says something about what they think about him in terms of his potential. So I like that group, and David Connor's another one that certainly looks the part. you got to do everything you can to make sure that you've got a quality 2D because we saw this past fall, once you get in the season, you have what you have. And it's just so important this 2024 season to maximize Shador Sanders' potential at this level and get him in high up in that first round of the NFL draft. And so that group is certainly motivated. Again, going back to that conversation I had with Benson, they really and we even heard Coach Prime say on a well-off media video that group got up in some belligerent person's face when they were all on their official visit hanging out with Shador Sanders, and they had his back before they even had committed to Colorado. So that's what you need from that group is they're going to have to band together because even if they play pretty well, there's still going to be criticism. That's just a thankless position at times. But man, if you're just above average as an offensive lineman going in next year, you're going to receive so much praise because Shador Sanders, when given time, is obviously one of the elite quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, no question. And I like their chances against drunk fans in a bar, but you got to see how they do against Big 12 defensive linemen, right? But I do like this group better. As far as let's move on to receiver because Coach Prime has added some more weapons for Shador and the other quarterbacks as well. And did you watch last night? Shannon Sharp had his late night thing, and Deion Sanders was the guest on there. Did you watch any of that?
I caught just a few minutes of it.
Okay, so I was kind of skimming through it a little bit, but it was kind of the first time that I remember, Coach Prime saying something. He was asked about Travis Hunter and maybe hinting that, yeah, we want to maybe give him a few breathers here and there, work in some time where he doesn't, where we give him a few breaks here and there. I'm paraphrasing, and I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but it seemed like that was the hint. And to do that, you've got to have some really good players at receiver and some really good players at corner to play when he's not in there. And receiver, we know they're losing Xavier Weaver, they're losing Javon Antonio, and so you've got to kind of replace that. You have good talent, but they've got some guys coming in. Will Shepherd, I'm looking at my list here, but Will Shepherd obviously led Vanderbilt in receiving, and people say, well, Vanderbilt. Well, look at Zay Weaver. He led a bad USF team in receiving. It was really good for the Buffs this year. Will Shepherd, to me, is one of the most exciting transfers they've got.
Well, sometimes you have to look a little bit beyond the box score, right? I think when we're reporting on this stuff, you put out there what you can at the time when they commit, and then you kind of circle back and try to dig a little bit deeper. And, Terrell Timmons Jr., when he commits, was like, okay, I see he got on the field a little bit there at NC State. Okay.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like, okay, this is a guy you definitely need to bring into this program. And then you talk to folks that covered him at NC State, and they say he's a really good deep threat. They just couldn't get the ball to him deep. And so there's more to the fact that he didn't put up monster numbers as a freshman and sophomore there. So you get a little bit more excited about a guy like that once you kind of hear about his potential a little bit. But I think you got to go with Will Shepherd as the headliner of that group, just based on what he did in the SEC. And I don't know if he's an Xavier Weaver clone, but from a just overall talent standpoint, he's on par, I feel like. And so you add a little bit of depth in there as well with, and then you bring in Cordell Russell, who is a blue chip recruit coming out of high school, and big kid at 6'4", 210. So you've upgraded that position. And this is with losing a guy in Zay Weaver that might actually end up getting drafted this year or next year.
And Will Shepherd, he's bigger than Xavier Weaver. I think he's 6'3", 6'2", something like that. So he's closer to a Javon Antonio size. But then, obviously you also have Amari Miller, Caleb Mathis, just a walk-on, but he was making some plays there towards the end of the season. Obviously Jimmy Horn Jr., is slated to come back. So they've got a lot of talent there. So I like what they've done there. And then at tight end, Shimon Mateer, is that how you say his name, from Cincinnati?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think he got about 23 passes or so at Cincinnati. They need a tight end. I mean, obviously, I think as of right now, the only scholarship tight end on the roster is Louis Passarello, who missed the season with an injury. So, you kind of need a tight end there. And he looks like a pretty good one. What do you think about him?
Or maybe we get the Shane Cokes Bishop Thomas combo out there
Yeah.
again in 2024. That was actually one of my favorite parts of the TCU game, and maybe one of my favorite parts of the whole season. But
Right.
yeah, no, that's a good pickup there. Our national people that rank these guys think really highly of him. As we record this, he's ranked 5th among all tight end transfers, and so not knowing who your position coach is going to be, although my guess is that's going to get announced pretty soon.
And he may
But
know.
still, and he probably does,
Yeah.
and maybe not quite knowing though how the tight end's going to be used, but
Mhm.
knowing that he's probably going to be at the top of the pecking order. So he will get utilized if he comes in and plays well. There was a 4-game stretch this past season where he had a total of 200 receiving yards. So wasn't breaking any type of receiving records there at Cincinnati, but was somebody that had a really nice stretch there and has a bigger frame than what we saw when they got Seydou Traore as a tight end commit last year. And obviously that didn't work out. So hopefully it does here.
Yeah, and numbers were fairly similar to what Michael Harrison had, a little bit less, but a bigger body that might be able to help you more as a blocker. And then sticking with offense, they've got 2 quarterback transfers, and that's been kind of the narrative. Like, well, with Shador there, you're not going to be able to bring in transfer quarterbacks. Well, they've got 2 of them, both from the SEC. Destin Wade from Kentucky, Will Taylor, is that right? Walter Taylor from Vanderbilt. A couple guys that didn't play a ton, but they do have a little bit of experience. I like these guys. I mean, it shows obviously some athleticism they're bringing in at quarterback, some size, and obviously Coach Prime has said we need to get people behind Shador that can come in and play well.
Yeah, and it's really difficult when you've got a starting quarterback as talented as Shador Sanders to really bring in top level guys there. And so to bring in a couple guys that have at least seen some action at the Power 5 level, and with Walter 6'7", and he can run. That's an intriguing aspect. But they just haven't done enough in games to really know. Ever since the JT Shrout thing, maybe I'm just a little hesitant until I see these guys actually go out there and perform. But I think Walter Taylor had a really good spring game for Vanderbilt last year. He got on the field for a few throws this past year, I think 15 attempts. So you're doing something right if you're part of the mix. Now, is he the future of the position in Boulder? It would be hard to say at this point.
Yeah, and you're right. You take it kind of with a grain of salt and it's like, well, let's see him on the field first. But I do think that when you take guys that are still young and that were wanted by SEC programs, you'd say, okay, well, that's some good depth there. I think the concern, at least for me, would be I liked how Ryan Staub played against Utah, and I think he's got a good future as a college football quarterback. But does something like this make him jump in the portal and you lose him, long term? And maybe they're not super worried about that, but he's at least a guy that's done it a little bit for Colorado. And so who knows what that depth looks like, but at least as of right now, they've got 4 guys that have played some college football.
That's a position where it's not 4 is a good number. If you can keep it there somehow, that would be great.
Yeah, and it looks better than, last year your 2 backups were 2 true freshmen that had never played, a lick of college football. So you like that going into it better than you did last year. So see, that's it offensively, I believe. Let's switch over to defense and the defensive line. The big one today was, we talked about it beforehand. You say it. The kid from Houston, Chidozie
Wonkwe, right?
Wonkwa or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, man, we're just butchering it. We even tried. We should have let off the show with Chidozie because
And we apologize for butchering.
We will be very fluent in this young man's name, but he literally committed a half an hour before we hit record here, and we're all getting up stories. So
what I do know is that because Houston had a pronunciation guide, the N is silent. So it is like Wonkwa or something like that. But regardless, he's a very
I'm going Wonkwa. So that's my official, my final answer there.
All right. Well, talented guy though. He's a 4-year starter from Houston, and didn't put up big stats, but nose guards don't put up big stats. And so he was known as a run stuffer. Coach Prime has said there's 2 things we need to do: run the football and stop the run. This is a guy that can stop the run.
I love 5'11" defensive tackles that have a background in wrestling. and he was somebody that was a really successful wrestler in high school. You always hear that term "low man wins," and yeah, you need length as a defensive lineman, especially as an edge guy, but to plug some gaps in there. And he was really efficient doing this at Houston. Got better every year. This past year was his best year there. He's played a ton of football.
Mhm.
A lot of schools contacted Chidozie once he hit the portal. He took a visit to Missouri as well, and so this is a good get. And this is somebody that I really think is going to battle for a starting job on this defensive line in 2024.
Yeah, to me, this is one of the transfers that CU fans ought to be most excited about, because I think that he is one of the most seasoned and proven guys at a position of a big time need. And they've got other guys up front, but the last couple of years we've seen them bring in a lot of guys with from other Power Five programs that have potential. Well, this guy's done it, and so I'm excited about Chidozie to see what he can do.
Yep, definitely.
And
And this is one of the areas where we're going to continue to probably see them continue to address it, because
yep,
you can't go into next season or even spring ball with linebacker the same position it's at right now. And I get that everybody's trying to get these top level linebackers, but that you're making a list of things that you still need. That's got to be number one on the list.
yeah, and defensive line. You hope that Bishop Thomas has some good development in the offseason. He's still a young player. I was actually up there briefly visiting someone the other day and saw the only person in the weight room working out was Shane Cokes. And so you hope that he comes back, and he said he's leaning towards coming back. He needs a big season, but also defensive line. Anquin Barnes is coming over from Alabama. Has not played a ton, but he's an Alabama recruit. Some much needed size up front, and then as an edge rusher, Quincy Wiggins from LSU. What do you think of those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I don't quite know what to make of Anquin Barnes, other than the fact that Charles Kelly coached this guy and has
Yeah.
some intimate knowledge. Now, the negative view of that would be, well, okay, Demoy Kennedy and Jaquez Robinson were maybe not as impactful as some had hoped in 2023. Now, though, both those guys are back, they could develop, still have great careers at Colorado. So there's that part of it. But he didn't play a whole lot there. But
Yeah.
Alabama's third strings are better than most people's starters. So it is what it is in that sense. And then Quincy Wiggins was just a big time recruit coming out of high school, was actually ranked number one in the state of Louisiana on 24/7 Sports coming out of high school, and decided to stay close to home and got on the field, a decent amount there for LSU in kind of a backup role. But it was good that I believe he was able to redshirt one of those years, right?
Yeah.
So he's got three to play three.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, this is a guy you can bring up and develop. He certainly looks like an NFL guy walking around. So this is going to be a big project for South Senzeri, and you gotta, this is somebody that hasn't really left Baton Rouge. That's where he went to high school. That's where he went to college. So it's important that this staff has kind of got that Southern feel to it, that they can, hopefully make him feel like Boulder's a home away from home with all the connections on this staff having to the South.
And a lot of players on this team that have come from the South that seem to really like it here, and have talked about how much they've loved Boulder. And so that's going to help transition a guy like that, or some of these guys coming from the South into Boulder, is that they've got some people that have been through it as well. One last transfer, I think, is the last one we haven't talked about. Actually, no, there's two. Keaton Wade, the outside linebacker, Kentucky, the twin brother of Destin Wade, more experienced than his brother at a different position, obviously, but I like his potential. Still a young player, has not redshirted yet, but he's been productive in this time at Kentucky.
And it sounds like, based off what Chase Howell told me today, he was hearing that Keaton Wade actually might end up having a chance to test himself out at inside linebacker. So maybe that would be a piece that you try out there as well. He's got the size. He's about 250. So we'll see where he fits in, and whether that's on the edge where he played at Kentucky. Probably, underrated guy. I think if Keaton Wade was somebody that committed to Colorado during the Carl Durrell era, we might have just done a video about him. And, not to say he's a footnote, but, this is somebody that, when you're getting all these commitments all the time, it just, you're going to move on to the next one. And I don't know if the Wade brothers have gotten their due, discussion. And then Preston Hodge, though, like, I could see him as the starting cornerback opposite Travis Hunter this year, based on what he did at Liberty this past year. He's got a 4-star transfer rating on 24/7 Sports. He looks like the real deal. And this would be a genius move for him if it pays off, because I think, even though Liberty has had success and they're playing Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, I think you come to Colorado and you make teams throw more at Travis Hunter because you're so good. Man, that's going to make you look really good in the eyes of NFL scouts. So, of the guys that have committed that maybe are a little bit more under the radar, Preston Hodge might be number one on my list in terms of a guy that I think is quite a bit better. But you look at Liberty, even though they had success, it just isn't a big name program, and maybe a guy that people should get excited about but aren't right now.
Yeah, and a guy that he was their starter at star throughout most of this season. So he's got a little bit of that versatility. I don't know how they use that star at CU. It's kind of a nickel position. A lot of places it is. So he's got that position flexibility where if Cormani McLean's development, if he takes that big leap and he's that other corner, you've got Preston Hodge there to play that star, which that's going to be on the field a lot too. And so either way, he made the secondary better just by adding him. So I think that's it for transfers. Have we covered everybody as of right this moment that we're doing this, as far as we know?
Let me check Twitter, Brian. I think we're okay. I think we're okay for right now. But by the time we actually get this up, it's hard to say.
Yeah, well, there's at least 15 guys we talk about there. The Buffs are close to that 85. We know that's going to change. We're not going to talk numbers right now because that's going to change so much. We know there's going to be guys, some attrition. There's going to be some additions, things like that. I don't think they ever hit 85. I don't think they've ever hit 85 during the prime era. And in the past, they'd be up to 92, 93, and people are like, how are they going to do this? Well, I think this year we might actually see them get close to the 90 and have those people worry about how we're going to get to those numbers. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And this week, it's only Monday. It's going to be a big week, Adam. And so we got to buckle in, and fans got to buckle in, because it's going to be a big and kind of a long week.
It just feels like if they can get that linebacker position solidified, there's going to be so much more competition from that second team pushing first team guys than we saw. And that makes sense. I mean, they completely overhauled the roster, but you're just going to miss on certain guys. And so you kind of have that second cycle of wash, for lack of a better term. But this is stacking another really, really solid transfer class on there. And so you just feel so much better about a lot of positions. And the one that it doesn't seem like they're going to address, and I know we got to sign off here, Brian, but running back, it seems like Alton McCaskill, the fourth, they're putting a lot of stock into his potential. And so he's going to be one of the keys for them next year as well.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do there, because we don't know what Savion Wilkerson's going to do either. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But we'll be back later on this week. We'll talk more about the high school guys, and I'm sure we'll be back again at some point this winter, because there's going to be more transfers to talk about as well. So Adam, I'll see you later this week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian.